Welcome everyone. Here with us in Israel we have Professor Mordechai Kedar. Professor Kedar is an Israeli scholar of Arab culture and a regular lecturer at many universities. He served for 25 years in the IDF military intelligence, where he specialized in Islamic groups, the political discourse of Arab countries, and the Arabic press. Professor Kedar has a PhD from Bar Ilan University and is fluent in both Hebrew and Arabic. He has promoted an innovative Palestinian-Israeli peace plan referred to as the Palestinian Emirates, or the 8-state solution, which we will discuss later in the episode. Thanks for having me at your beautiful home, Professor Kedar.
Pleasure to have you.
So, are your mornings always this hectic? Or
well, as you know, last night the IDF got rid of three leaders, military leaders of the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and now the whole world is in a turmoil because everybody expects the next round, which might be very big, between Israel and the Islamic Jihad, and there are big questions which are still unanswered, like will Hamas join? Will Hezbollah join? What will Iran, the sponsor of the Islamic Jihad, do? So all these questions are now in the air, and people are very much interested. So this is why this day especially, is very hectic.
Well, I wanted you to give a brief overview to those that don't know the history. Can you tell the viewers in a nutshell what has happened in Israel since 1948? What's this conflict between, the Arab-Israeli conflict, Palestinian-Israeli conflict in general?
Well, it started way before 1948. 1948 was where the state was declared. But Arabs and Muslims were totally against any attempt of the Jews to come in masses to their ancestral land, the land of Israel. Arabs and Muslims were totally against any Jewish state or statehood or any kind of Jewish sovereignty, because according to Islam, Jews should live under the yoke of Islam, by the way, Christians as well, as dhimmis, as people who are enjoying the auspice of Islam, with very reduced rights. Unlike Muslims who enjoy full rights. And Jews have no right to a state, no right to an army, no right to a land, because this land was occupied by the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, means Muslims, and any land has only one-way ticket to enter the land of Islam or the house of Islam, not to get out. By the way, this is why they want Spain to return to the Islamic bosom, on Sicily and large parts of the Balkans, all the way north to Vienna, where they defeated in September 11, 1683.
Wow, 1683.
September 11.
Same day.
Now you can understand why September 11 was chosen for the attack on...
It's not a coincidence.
Not at all. They live in history. History is alive and kicking. And in the Islamic case, alive and killing. Because, for example, the Sunni-Shia rift inside Islam, what is it all about? Is it about the succession of Muhammad since the year of 632 when he died? And they are still fighting.
But do all Arab Muslims, believe in this? I mean, do you think Saudi Arabia has relationship with Europe? Do you think Saudi Arabia, the king Saudi Arabia, he believes that actually the Iberian Peninsula, which you mentioned in Spain, should be part of Islam, or it's just out of convenience that they have relations with Europe?
All the above. He believes that not only Iberia, the whole world, should be Islamic, especially the countries which were Islamic in the past. Yet, for time being, we can cooperate in order to get, more powerful and to get accepted. And we are not suicidal. This is the logic which they think. They are not suicidal, neither in Iran. Because if they commit mass suicide, who will remain? So they run the daily life according to the givens of the world, according to the situation.
But it's still part of the belief system.
Yet the belief system and the hope is that inshallah one day, God willing, will be the masters of the whole world. This is how these, especially the jihadists, for whom the jihad, in order to implement these ideas, is much more imminent.
So does that explain why? Let's shift the conversation a little bit to the Arab-Israeli conflict, particularly Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Does that explain why 1967, to those that don't know, Israel conquered in a defensive war, conquered Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, and Gaza. And there was no claim before of any statehood whatsoever. It started in 1967, if I'm not mistaken. And what exactly happened there, and what would be a potential solution for the conflict?
The so-called West Bank was occupied illegally by Jordan since 1948. Illegally. Israel liberated this part of what they call Palestine, means the land of Israel, in 1967, after 19 long years of illegal Jordanian occupation. It has to be clear. Gaza was occupied by Egypt. Palestinians, or those Arabs who lived in these areas, if they spoke about independence from Jordan and Egypt, they would be hung up from their tongues, because neither Jordan nor Egypt would tolerate such a talk. Only Israel allows them, because Israel is democracy. Okay, so since Israel liberated these areas from the Jordanian and the Egyptian occupations, now they can speak about the Palestinian state. And this is how it changed.
But the Palestinian identity per se, I mean, where does this come from? Because I know you've spoken a lot about different tribes living in these areas, and about different. So what makes the Palestinian identity? I mean, when was that born historically?
The Palestinian entity, or the Palestinian nation, is I would say, the biggest lie of the 20th century. Nobody talked about such a nation or such a people before 1930, more or less. It started a bit earlier, but until the big Arab revolt, and that's how they call themselves, big Arab revolt of 1936 and 1939. They didn't call it Palestinian revolt, because on those days, Jews who were living here, like my parents, who came here in the 30s, were also Palestinians, because they live in the mandatory Palestine, Eretz Israel. This is how it was called. So, am I a Palestinian? Since my parents also were Palestinians with their identity card. So this is why the Palestinian as an Arab only is a new invention. Because the Israelis do not want to be called Palestinians, because we are in Eretz Israel, so we are the state of Israel. So the Jews have a state, Israel. So what did the Arabs have? They stuck to the name of Palestine. However, Palestine is not an Arab name. There is no P in Arabic. So how could it? So
how do you say Palestinian in?
They say Philistine with F. But this is more than clear that this is an artificial nation which was invented. And when you check the names of the people, you can understand exactly who they are. There are many names, like Al-Masri, means the Egyptian. Masarwa, Egyptians in plural. Al-Khurani, from the Khoran in Syria. Tarabulsi, from Tripoli in Lebanon. Karaki, from Karak in Jordan. Sorani, from Sor, which is Tyre in Lebanon. Sidawi, from Sidon in Lebanon again. Many places. You know what? There is a family named Bushnak in the north. Bushnak means somebody who came from Bosnia.
So it's Arabs
since when they became Palestinians?
So these were Arabs that moved to the land of Israel at some point in history
mainly
to work.
here, because as they move today to Europe or to America to work, because they look for jobs. So those days they migrated to here because the Jews came here under the mandate, and there were opportunities to work here in the, as farmers or in buildings or in the industry, which started those days when Jews came from Europe and brought all kinds of new ventures of industry or something else.
But theoretically, you could argue that an identity or a people can be created. I mean, when they start having things in common, they start marrying each other, they start, developing a language, a culture. You can create a culture or a nation. But the thing, what I'm wondering here is that it seems that they're not marrying each other right now. Like the Palestinians from Gaza, or forget Gaza, let's talk about the Judea and Samaria. The Palestinians from Nablus and the Palestinians from Ramallah, they're not marrying each other. Or
the so-called Palestinians, they are very clannish society. Very clannish. Means a girl from Hebron has usually no option to get married to a boy from Nablus, because they are not from us. That's how they think. And therefore, if you tell me the name of somebody, I'll tell you where he lives. Because they don't move from place to place. Because in your town or your village, within your extended family, you are in the homeland. If you cross the street and you live in another village, you are in exile. This is the mindset in Arab societies. Europeans and Americans do not get it, because for them, the homeland is what says in the map. Yeah. Here in the Middle East, homeland is the family. Means the extended family, the Hamula, as they say, or Ashira, Kabila, the tribe, or the clan, actually. So this is how the Middle Eastern mindset actually makes the whole thing so different from what Europeans and Americans think. And this is why it's so hard for Americans and Europeans to find solutions to the problems of the Middle East, because they think like Americans and Europeans. While here in the Middle East, the name of the social game is totally different.
So the successful nations in the Middle East, they're all cultural, they're all homogeneous, right? They're all like clans, one clan in the entire country. And let's talk about, for example, I would say that let's talk about Saudi Arabia, for example, arguably a successful to a certain extent nation. Is it only one tribe in the entire nation? Or you have several tribes? And if you have several tribes, then couldn't you argue that we can create an artificial, let's say, a Palestinian country and have different tribes coexist with another, or that's impossible in your view?
Well, the successful countries of the Middle East are only the countries which are based on the Middle Eastern culture, which is tribalism. The Emirates, for example, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, and so forth, each and every one of them is one single tribe, based on one single tribe, which owns the country. Kuwait is Al Sabah. Al is a family. Al Sabah in Kuwait, Al Thani in Qatar, Al Nahyan in Abu Dhabi, Al Maktoum in Dubai, and so forth. Saudi Arabia is also a state which is based on one extended family, which is Al Saud. This is the source of the name of Saudi Arabia. However, the founding father of this kingdom, Abdulaziz ibn Saud, the father of today's King Salman and former King Abdullah and Fahd and all those, he actually united tribes by marriage. He married a daughter of the leaders, the daughters of the leaders of many tribes in the Arab Peninsula, in order to create some kind of commitment, in order to make sure that they will never revolt against him. Because their grandchildren, means the sons of their daughters, will be kings or will be in the royal family. So this is how he ensured that all these groups, which were different, which were separate, will be under one umbrella of the royal family, by marriage. And this is how it works.
So this phenomenon of tribalism might explain why you have, for example, countries like Afghanistan, that you have 20 different failing states. It's because of the difference of tribes.
Afghanistan has 11 ethnic groups which cannot even speak to each other because they don't have common language, unlike India, for example. You know, India is united only because they have English, not because they speak in any of the Indian languages. Who knows how many hundreds of languages there are in India. But they share only one language, which is English, because of the colonialism. So because of the English, they can run one state in spite of all the differences and divisions inside India. Afghanistan, they don't have English. So instead of talking to each other, they shoot each other.
I've been thinking about this. People in the U.S., I come from the U.S., people say that diversity is our strength. It's something that a lot of people, are talking about right now.
Nonsense.
I tend to agree with you, but I think, you can argue that it's the strength if you can bring a diversity of opinions or cultures or like different foods, and you can, you go in the States, you have Italian food, you have this, but it seems that you need to have homogeneous, not culture, but value systems. Like in the US, if you have an Italian and I don't know, a person from Israel, and they both believe in life, the values of life, liberty, property, then you can argue that diversity is a strength. But if you believe in completely different things, how can you argue that it's a strength? And how does that apply in the Middle East? You don't have that system here.
Look, the main idea of pluralism and even, multiculturalism is acceptance. When each and every side or every component of the society accepts the others and believes that they have the right to be others and to conduct their life the way they like and to leave them alone. Okay, this is the basis. Yeah. Without tolerance and acceptance, which are two sides of the same coin, tolerance and acceptance, you cannot run a diverse society. For example, the Indian society, very, acceptance is the name of the game. Tolerance is the name of the game in India. This is why India is a flourishing country, in spite of all the differences within the Indian society. When it comes to Muslims, acceptance is a problem. Because according to Islam, they have a rule in Islam, Islam ya'lu wa la yu'ala alayhi. Islam is superior and nothing can be above Islam. Means if you're a Christian or a Jew and I'm a Muslim, equality cannot be between us because I'm a Muslim, to begin with. Therefore, you have to cancel your values because of mine, means if I'm a Muslim. Because you cannot challenge Islamic values by openness or by all kinds of things which the West believes in today. Freedom for women. Freedom for women is unheard of in Islam. It's only recently they started to talk about this. A woman in many cases of Islamic thought, of the Middle Ages, which are still valid until this very day in too many Islamic societies, is that a woman is no more than a walking womb. A woman has no emotions. A woman has no wills. Nothing. A woman is a servant of the man, and her womb hosts his fetus for 9 months, but it doesn't belong to her. It belongs to him. That's why she cannot perform any abortion. To that degree. And this appears until this very day in the books of Muslim religious authorities. Until this very day, they based on this kind of discourse against women. So therefore, freedom of a woman is a subject to her father as long as she is unmarried. And when she's get married, she's actually moving from the yoke of her father to the yoke of her husband. There is no gap inside.
And can't you argue that Christian, of course there's a difference, but can't you argue that from my understanding, Christians believe that you need to be a Christian in order to go to to heaven. Isn't that comparable to the belief in Islam? Not people believe that in the system, but they're not really internalizing. That's why you have moderates.
Look, Christianity had many issues in the past, many problems in the past. You can talk about how the Catholics slaughtered Protestants, the Huguenots, in France in the Middle Ages. Okay, the Christianity had a very dark ages. Like in Spain, they burnt Jews if they suspected that they were not fully Christians. Okay, but for hundreds of years already, Christianity is tolerating anything else, any other religion. There are some missionaries, but they don't force anything on you. They don't impose Christianity on anyone. These times, moved to no end, to no return. Okay, so but Islam and don't forget, today in Islam is the 15th century. How did the Christianity behave in their 15th century? Okay, so Islam is rather young, or younger than the Christianity. That's why Islam is still forces itself on others, as we can see in many places. Or at least this is what they believe that they should do, because the world was created as one world without borders. Borders were marked by the infidels in order to fight each other. Once the whole world will be under the Islamic rule, there will be in Islamic Pax Islamica, means a peace of the whole world under Islam. By the way, they also believe that every human being is born Muslim, and his parents corrupt him by turning him to be a Jew or a Christian or infidel. Okay? So you should carry this in mind as well.
So understanding this picture of the Middle East, how does that philosophy translate into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? I think you've proposed the eight states.
It's not only Palestinians. Palestinian, around them the Arab world, and around them the Islamic world, like an onion. You cannot isolate the Palestinians from the Arab world, and you cannot isolate the Arab world from the Islamic world, like Iran, Turkey, which are Muslims, are not Arabs. The solution can be only a Middle Eastern solution. Means to establish Emirates, because this is the only paradigm which works in the Middle East. Look, other paradigms like socialism and nationalism like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Sudan have all failed. With a high cost of blood, as you see in each and every one of these countries. Lebanon also is a failed experiment in human beings, as the French designed like 100 years ago. So what I'm saying is that in order to achieve a real peace between us and the so-called Palestinians, we have to follow the culture of the Middle East, because otherwise it won't work. And the culture of the Middle East, which is tribal culture, which makes Kuwait and Qatar and all these countries successful, the same thing should be emulated here, and to establish a emirate in Hebron for the clans of Hebron, another one in Jericho, another one in Ramallah, Shechem means Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarm and Kalkilia, all these 7 cities of the Judea and Samaria, in addition to the emirate of Gaza, which was established in June 2007, 16 years ago, by Hamas, and it's functioning like a state very well. And Israel should remain forever in the rural areas, offer Israeli citizenship to the villagers, while the cities will be independent, and every city will give its citizenship to its own residents.
They will have autonomy in each.
Independence.
They won't have. So there's a couple of things that I'm wondering here. So first thing is contiguity between each city, because if Israel is in the middle in the rural areas, how do you connect one city to the other if they want to make contiguity? And what if one city one of the so-called Emirates goes rogue? They don't want to be a part of a broader union of these Emirates.
First of all, there are many countries in the Arab world who have no territorial contiguity. There is no contiguity between Jordan and Egypt. There is a sea in between, the Red Sea. Okay? There is no contiguity between Sudan and Algeria because there are other countries in between. So there will not be territorial contiguity between Shechem and Hebron. What's the difference? These are two separate states. And this is what we have to start thinking about. Secondly, if they want to have a union like a federation, let them have federation, as long as they don't have territorial contiguity, because territorial contiguity might turn into a terrorist contiguity, which no one needs.
Just to be clear, would you dismantle the PA altogether? I mean, to implement this, if you were prime minister right now and you would need to, implement your solution, would you dismantle the PA? Who would you give the authority in each city to? Would you give it to, and can you pinpoint who exactly would take the reins of the authority?
The PA was born in sin, to begin with. Instead of taking the local authorities, the local leaderships, and delegate the authority to them, as it should be like in the Emirates, Israel brought criminals and terrorists under the umbrella, under the leadership of Arafat, the chief terrorist, and gave them a state, hoping that they will turn from jihadists to peaceful leaders. You cannot base your foreign policy, especially the security policy, on hopes. It doesn't work. Hopes are in one valley and policy is in another valley. And policy has to be based on facts and real things. And unfortunately, those years, in the beginning of the 90s, Peres and Beilin and their aides dragged the country to an impossible way how to run its life with their neighbors, with Israel's neighbors. It cannot work.
So this was Rabin and Peres that brought...
Rabin was dragged by Peres and Beilin.
And they brought Arafat from Libya.
Tunisia.
Right? From Tunisia.
Yeah.
Back to Israel and to negotiate with them.
And they gave him arms. Who with the right mind gives a terrorist arms? And they gave him soldiers. And they gave him the opportunity to bring all the terrorists which he had in Syria, in Lebanon, in Tunisia, wherever they were, to bring them in order to run the state on the make which Israel gave him, hoping that he will be peaceful one day. But, he never took off his uniform. He was always, even in the signing of the Oslo agreements in the 1993 on the loan of the White House, he came with the uniform. What does it mean that he came with the uniform? That he is still in battle. That he never left. He never changed his clothes from military clothes to regular clothes, to civil clothes. Never. Didn't it signal something? Didn't they understand this? Okay, they ignored the two clear projectors which showed them that they are wrong, but they shut their eyes in order not to see all the warnings which were all over the place. Look, he established the PA in the summer of 1994. In October, like 3 months later, he went to speak in various states, and he was also in Johannesburg, in South Africa. And there, somebody asked him, how come you give peace to the Jews? So he said, this is the same peace which our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave to the infidels of Mecca in Hudaybiyah. So the man got the answer and it was okay. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean, Hudaybiyah? Hudaybiyah means temporary peace, only because the Muslims are weak. They cannot fight the infidels of Mecca. So he gave them temporary peace, which he violated 2 years later. Okay? The same thing said Arafat. Means he didn't say the whole process, but what he said, the Hudaybiyah, means temporary peace, which you can violate whenever you like. So, Israel knew about this, but they hid this recording, which came to here like 2 weeks after it happened. and they hid it. It came out like 10 years later. But they didn't even need it, because Arafat kept saying wherever he went, in Judea and Samaria or in Gaza, that this peace, means the Oslo agreements, are like the Hudaybiyah agreement or Hudaybiyah peace, which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave to the infidels of Mecca. I myself have like at least 5 or 6 recordings of Arafat saying it in different occasions.
So, but Rabin didn't know this? I mean, the prime minister of Israel back then, they knew this, and why would they still push an agenda? I mean, you can say a lot of things about Rabin, but I think he loved Israel. I mean, he wanted the best.
Rabin, apparently, he didn't believe a word from Arafat, and he might have been canceling the agreement at some point. However, he was murdered beforehand, and Peres, who took over, continued in spite of everything. Peres and Beilin and Alon Liel and all the others who were leading this country those days to this peace, and Yossi Sarid, they did not let facts disrupt their theory.
Nowadays, now we have, it's a given, we have the PA now. So if
no, it's not a given.
We have the PA, it's established. We can topple it.
Just stop the money, and they will run away. And now, when they run away, means all the officials of the PA, when they run away, you can do the right thing. Delegate the authority and the money to the clans, to the local authorities of each and every one of those cities.
And would they take, do you think the clans will take the reins? Or they will say, no, we don't have any
They hate the authority. Because the authority is illegitimate in their eyes. Because the authority was established by the Jews, by the Zionists. For the Zionists. By the Zionists. In order to serve the interests of the Zionists. That's why the PA is illegitimate. People accept the PA only as long as it brings money and livelihood to the people. That's all.
So, but these clans, is it possible that these clans will turn against Israel and attack Israel? And
most chances not, because clans, the tribal culture of the Middle East, wants to achieve stability, good economy, good life to the people, and they usually don't care about other things. National issues do not talk to them. Because nationalism is something which was invented in the West, to unite the French, to unite the Belgians, to unite all those Romanians and Hungarians and all those. Here in the Middle East, tribalism is the name of the game. They care about their own tribe. They don't care about another city or another village, because they are a different group. And this is the Middle East. This is why most chances that the clans will actually get rid of the jihadists way before we know about them. Because once they see somebody who doesn't go along with the guidelines of the tribe, they find him immediately. And they educate him in their way.
So does the PA right now combat terror? Do you think they actually combat terror, or they cultivate terror?
They cooperate with Israel only as long as they don't have other choice. But they will not initiate any activity against the terrorists if Israel does not demand it, if Israel doesn't give them the names, if Israel doesn't give them the locations. Only when they see that Israel knows too much about these terrorists and Israel might do the job by itself, only then they will do something, maybe.
There's a possibility of Abbas dying soon. I mean, the guy's like 85 years old, right? Or how old?
And he's ill.
And he's ill. So what do you think, what's going to happen? Is chaos going to erupt in Judea and Samaria as soon as Abbas dies? And who's going to take over the PA? And isn't that an opportunity to dismantle the PA altogether and implement your peace plan here?
There are at least 5 people under Abu Mazen today who actually prepare for that day. It's Majid Faraj, the head of the security organizations under Abbas, Tawfiq Tirawi, one of them, Mahmoud Al-Alul, Jibril Rajoub, Could be that Dahlan will be connected with Hussein al-Sheikh. I don't know. All these five are collecting separately money, people, and above all weapons, ammunition, and whatever they need in order to form a militia which will run to the street, run to the government institutions in order to catch them once Mahmoud Abbas is not anymore here. It might cause a civil war between these five armies or militias.
Are they from different tribes, these individuals?
They are from the tourists, or most of them. Jibril al is not, but some of them are from those who were brought from Tunisia. They tried to recruit and to incorporate some clans or some people. Big question if they succeed, I don't know. And every day it changes. Because if he offers you more money, you'll move your clan to be loyal to another one. It's a very tricky thing. Yet, to think that after Abu Mazen, there will be a stable society and stable moving of the authority from Abu Mazen to his successor, which is unknown yet, it's too much of optimism.
I've never understood this. Maybe you can shed some light on this. Why? I speak to my grandparents that they live in Israel. They tell me that before 1994, before Oslo, they used to go to Ramallah and to territories and buy fruits and go to the markets and speak to the people and cooperation. So Oslo, what essentially did, I mean, you can probably argue that, okay, you separate yourself from the Palestinians, you don't have to, govern over them. But isn't that destructive to the Palestinian economy? I mean, Ramallah is destroyed after this. Why is separation something that people are in favor of as if that's a good thing for them? I mean, isn't economic cooperation and people going there and buying things?
It's even more
a good thing?
I have a good friend who used to work in Ramallah, a Jewish guy, speaks Arabic fluently, was in official positions, and he had an office in Ramallah. He was like a liaison between people and organizations in Ramallah and organizations in Israel, like electricity company, water issues. He would mediate the liaison between the Israeli authorities at large and local, let's say, companies and local municipality parts in Ramallah. When the signing in the White House was of the Oslo agreements, people from Ramallah, those who was working with, came to his office and started to shout at him, "What are you doing? Bringing in the worst criminal in the world, Yasser Arafat. He will destroy your life and our life." This is what people told him. What craziness are you doing this? Why are you doing this? To bring Arafat from all the people in the world, to bring this crook? And he really didn't have any answer to these people, because they really, they were worried about themselves, about their economy, about their stability, and about the Israelis whom they work with, like this man.
Have you spoken to Israeli leaders about your plan, the 8-state solution?
Yeah, even with Netanyahu.
And what have they said?
Well, it means that they have to prepare it, they have to do it, they have to work on it, they have to give a timetable to this process, which will end up in separate entities in Hebron and Shechem and Nablus and all these things. Yes, you have to prepare it. Okay, apparently they are preoccupied with other issues, which are viewed as more urgent.
Don't you think Bennett government was tougher on Hamas than the current Netanyahu government?
No. First of all, don't forget that the government of Bennett comprised of the Islamic movement, which are Muslim Brotherhood, which are the ideological brothers of Hamas. They would not allow tough relations or tough attitude to Hamas. And Bennett knew it very well. And I'm pretty sure that if Bennett would have used power against Hamas, the Islamic movement would even warn him that they will leave the coalition, or they would leave the coalition, factually. So this is why I think that the government of Bennett and Lapid later was actually paralyzed, or at least partially paralyzed by the construct of the government when it came to really punish Hamas for their behavior. Hamas knew about this, and they didn't want to pull the rope with the government, so Hamas were, let's say, rather calm in those days because they tried to benefit from this government in other ways, by sending workers and so forth. This actually what I think was the balance between Israel and Hamas during that year and a half, due to the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood means Ra'am party, were in the coalition. Yet, a fastened grip on Gaza was maintained by many governments and many times since Hamas took over in June 2007.
What do you think of the current government, particularly Smotrich and Ben Gvir and some other controversial figures?
They have good intentions. The only question is how free they are to implement their line on the ground in many areas, not only in vis-a-vis Gaza. Legislation about the court system, legislation about Judea and Samaria and investments there. All these things are, on the table because this is a right-wingish government. And the attitude to Hamas is part of the whole thing.
To ask you about what's going on in the treaty that Saudi Arabia did with Iran recently. So they signed a treaty. Why would they do that? Aren't there like arch rivals? And I think they're reopening embassies. And does that kill the possibility of Israel having peace with Saudi Arabia at some point in the near future?
For this, one of my Saudi friends explained to me in some kind of picturesque way. He says, whenever you look up, we see the bottom of the bus. Okay? Means the Americans actually threw us under the bus by betraying us. Since even 2014, they started the negotiations with Iran about the JCPOA, which was finally signed in 2015. This was a knife in our back to negotiate such a thing with our enemies, the Iranians. Then the 2018, the Khashoggi issue, although it was stupid, it was something which never should have been done by the Saudis. All the Americans, especially Biden when he started his campaign, talked about that we will deem Saudi Arabia accountable for what they did to Khashoggi. Means the whole foreign policy of America revolved around one murder issue, which Saudi Arabia was or was not involved in.
But Trump wasn't like that, right? Trump was more pro-Saudi.
Trump was more pro-Saudi, but don't forget that in 2019, the 14th of September of that year, the Iranians attacked two major facilities of oil production of the Saudis without any warning. They launched missiles and drones from Yemen, from Iraq, and later it was found out that from Iran as well, and they destroyed some 50% of the oil production ability of Saudi Arabia for months. Big blow to the Saudi economy, which was not good. because of the war on Yemen. What did Trump do against Iran? And everybody knew that Iran was behind it. What did Trump do? Nothing. So for the Saudis, they were betrayed by both sides of the political aisle in America. America became a paper tiger which doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to do anything about. So why should Saudi Arabia be part of the American coalition? They would rather join the other coalition, means the Russian, Iranian, Chinese, North Korean, which today challenges the hegemony of the Western coalition, which is NATO, Australia, Israel maybe as well. And this one thing, the treasonous behavior of the Americans vis-a-vis the Saudis definitely pushed them to the other side. The other thing is that as long as Israel was viewed as a powerful country, countries like Saudi Arabia wanted to have relations with Israel, all kinds of relations, in order to show the Iranians that, hey, we might be weak, but look at our friends. Be careful. And as long as Israel was viewed as a powerful country, people like the Emirates would make peace with us, and it's an all-out peace with everything included, and Bahrain as well, because Israel was powerful. However, during the last couple of months, since the balagan, the chaos started in Israel about the judicial issues, and especially when pilots from the Air Force and sailors and all kinds of other special units started to sign petitions that they are not going to volunteer anymore to the army, this actually gave a big, big blow to the Israeli deterrence. Because those Arabs, when they see that all kinds of special units, like pilots and so forth, do not volunteer to the army because of whatever, they understand that the IDF is paralyzed. It cannot really work. That's what they understand. Whether it's correct or not, it doesn't matter. That's what they understood. And the deterrence of Israel was almost nullified. So Saudi Arabia says, hey, once we had in Israel some kind of something to lean on vis-a-vis Iran, but now Israel became so weak that we cannot anymore count on Israel. So this is why they cross the lines, because they think in the logic that if you cannot beat them, join them. So they could not beat them because of the weakness of America, which doesn't want to do anything. And don't forget that the weakness of America and Europe is demonstrated every single day in the Ukraine. And don't forget that these countries actually were the guarantors of the Ukrainian territorial contiguity in the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994, in order to convince the Ukrainians to give up on their share of the nuclear weapons of the ex-Soviet Union. And President Clinton said in this ceremony of the signing that Ukraine today is safer than before because it gave up on its nuclear ability, or the potential nuclear, which they could get from the storage of the bombs. Okay, so this is how the West, which was the guarantor in this Budapest Memorandum to the contiguity of the land of Ukraine, what do they do now? When Putin invaded Ukraine, what do they do? Means, according to the Arab mindset, America should have taken all its troops, all its army, and fight against Putin, because you are the guarantor for the Ukrainians. How come you don't do what you... Means you betrayed Ukrainians. And this is how the Saudis interpret what is happening in Ukraine. That those who committed themselves to the peace and the contiguity of the land of the Ukraine actually do nothing when Putin invades it. So this is why Saudi Arabia, means the Saudi family, who think in in traditional way, conservative way, Bedouin, the desert. This is the culture. And this is actually what makes them think what they think, their mindset. Okay? So in their mindset, the Americans are traitors. Now, not only this, they even say it. When the JCPOA was signed in 2015, I was looking at the Saudi newspapers, how they comment on it. And for like a week, nobody said a word. There were reports. Reports were, but not the commentary. Nothing from the royal family. Nobody said it. They kept their mouth shut. Until like a week after the signing, a guy named Bandar Ben Sultan, he was the ambassador of Saudi Arabia to Washington, D.C. He served there, I think, almost 30 years. He was the oldest diplomat in D.C., and he once said that he can drive his car in D.C. while his eyes are folded. That's how good he was familiar with D.C. He said, when he wrote a short article in a website named Ilaf, like a week after the signing, and he said, the very short article, he said, whatever we have said about this agreement, we have already said. I won't repeat it here. Whatever we'll say in the future, we'll say in the future. As for now, I would only like to remind my readers about something which I heard from the old fox of the American diplomacy, Henry Kissinger. He once told me that for its enemies, America is dangerous. For its friends, it might be fatal. This is the whole article. Now, in his Bedouin background, he couldn't say something worse than this about America. So what did he say actually? That you Americans, you are traitors. You betray your friends because your friends actually rely on you. Your friends should be safer because this friendship. They should feel that they are safe. So what do you mean? Your enemies are in danger, but for your friends you are fatal? You are worse than their enemies. Means you're worth nothing. You are not human beings. If you betray your friends to a degree that for them you are fatal, while for your enemies you are only dangerous. Okay? And this is how they feel, the Saudis, the Americans, who used Saudi oil ever since 1945. Before the oil in Mexico Bay was found, before the oil in the Northern Sea, to the north of Britain, was found, when the world was still addicted to the oil in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia was the supply of the West. Okay? And now, this is what you do to us? After so many years of living on our oil, which we gave you so graciously? And this is why the Saudis feel so hurt about the behavior of America in both sides of the aisle. Because Trump, although he had better intentions, yet his actions did not reflect it in most cases.
But didn't he, like Trump, for example, killed Soleimani, and he didn't care about the backlash? He went ahead and he just murdered him. Everybody said, wow, this is going to be horrible. Nothing happened in the end. And he came out of the JCPOA, out of the Iran deal. So didn't he present a better united front, more pro-Saudi front?
What the Saudis cared about is the fact that they were still, in spite of what happened with Soleimani, and in spite of the sanctions, they were targeted by the Houthis in Yemen day and night. They were targeted by all kinds of militias from Iraq day and night. They couldn't do anything about this. The Saudis are weak.
Militarily weak?
They are a weak country. They have the state of the art of the weapons, but in most cases they don't know how to operate them. They don't know. They cannot get rid of the Houthis in Yemen. Although these Houthis are what? What do they have? They have guns. They have some machine guns. They have some missiles and some drones, which the Iranians actually operate from Yemen. And that's all. They're nothing. They don't have an air force. They don't have anything. And Saudi Arabia has everything needed to get rid of them altogether, like Hezbollah. And they could not do it for years. And these Houthis were actually targeting all kinds of very sensitive targets in Saudi Arabia, especially airports. There once was an official ceremony when somebody came, I forgot who this was. Some official came from another country, and the stage with the speakers and the flags and two countries and the orchestra with the national anthems of both countries, the real ceremony. The Houthis shot missiles to the ceremony while the ceremony was taking place. So this is what the Saudis complain about. And they couldn't do anything about the Houthis. It took years. And actually, recently we heard about all kinds of agreements which actually are a surrender of the Saudis. Saudi Arabia is a weak country. This is why they need always a very powerful superpower to lean on. So as long as America or NATO was there, they did. They didn't need us. Recently, since the West looks much more treasonous, they were leaning on Israel. Now when Israel is viewed as weak because of the petitions of the pilots and so forth, so now nobody remained in the world to lean on. So they crossed the lines and they joined them.
And do you think there's still a chance for peace with the Saudis? Do you think there's a chance of making them break away from the recent agreement between them and Iran, or is it gone?
Well, I'm afraid that some Israeli officials would like to have some agreements with the Saudis in order to show the constituency that, hey, we are still in the market, while giving all kinds of concessions to the other side by, for example, canceling the idea of annexing the Jordan Valley, which in my view should be part of Israel. The Jordan Valley, definitely. Or all kinds of other things to the Palestinians, that this will be the price for any agreement with Saudi Arabia, which Iran will bless because of the price which Israel will pay. I'm afraid that there are politicians in Israel who would do it, especially in the left, but not only.
Why do the Saudis even care about what goes on with the Palestinians? I mean, isn't there a national interest at all, or is it just like for posturing?
Look, first of all, many of the Saudis do not see the Palestinians as Arabs to begin with, because they think that they are remnants of other nations who came and went in the Middle East and left their DNA in the Middle East. When a Saudi sees a Palestinian with blue eyes and blonde hair, he says, what, is this an Arab? Excuse me? Aren't you ashamed to say that you are an Arab? Because for them, they are the only real Arabs, because they remain in the Arab Peninsula. They have dark skin, they have black eyes or brown eyes, and they are tough and they are rough, and they are the real Arabs, while all those Iraqis and Syrians and Lebanese and Palestinians and all the others are fake Arabs. They speak Arabic, but they're not real Arabs. That's how they look upon them from high and above.
How does Turkey play a role in the Middle East exactly? I know that recently there's been like a warming of ties between Israel and Turkey. I don't know why this sudden change in like rhetoric, and also I was, now there are elections in Turkey in the next few weeks, and I heard the opposition leader, Kilistaroglu, something like that his name is, I think, and he spoke very tough. He said he had a lot of tough things to say about Israel in general. So I don't know if this is populism or if he personally doesn't like Israel, and how does Turkey in general have a role to play in the Middle East and in the relations with Israel?
Look, the Turkish society in general is a society which actually returned to Islam after some dozens of years, which was under the ideas of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, which established Turkey as a secular state. The society actually came back to Islam, and this actually what enabled Erdogan in the 90s, and as of 2003, Erdogan to become prime minister and now president, means the most influential person, and he is a Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is a Muslim Brotherhood guy, and his party is the Islamic Party. Okay, so he became the leader of the country not because he took the country over, but because he was elected by a society which becomes more and more Islamic, especially those days. Are they fed up with this? Could be partially. Yes, they are, at least part of them are fed up with this. They understand that Islam is not a solution, although this is the slogan of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are looking for something more maybe modern. They know that there are some countries which are run by the people, for the people, not by any kind of deity. And actually, Western Europe today, the widest religion there is atheism. People who don't feel any connection to, most of them are ex-Christians, or people who are born Christians, maybe baptized as well, but they don't see any connection to the religion. They don't go to churches. They share nothing with the religion, because this is laïcité. This is the outcomes of the laïcité, means secularism, which was one of the three pillars of the French Revolution, already in the end of the 18th century. So laïcité became atheism. Turkey goes through such a process, but only in the margin. The vast majority of the people there are actually returned to Islam. And the Islamic considerations are much more important in their eyes than all liberal values or things like this. So the contestant to Erdogan has to address this kind of culture. He cannot come with total secular ideology and hope to replace Erdogan when he knows that the majority of the people are religious and conservative. So he has to adjust his message to the ability of people to absorb and to accept, and at the end of the day to vote for him and not for Erdogan. I think that if he concentrates on corruption, he will win.
He will be better for Israel than Erdogan?
I have no idea, but once you take out the Muslim Brotherhood considerations, the chance that you view Israel as a legitimate entity which has a right to exist are bigger.
And why the recent warming of ties? Why in the last 9 months, Erdogan, I think 9 months ago, I think President Herzog was in Turkey and met with Erdogan. Why right now?
Well, I think the economic situation of Turkey is actually what pushes Erdogan to adjust himself and his ideology to the situation. Because what good will it be for him if he remains to be very radical from the Islamic point of view, while the state is deteriorated and collapses economically?
So it's economic considerations.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's economic, but he understands that if he doesn't solve the economic problem, he will be kicked out, because people have to eat at the end of the day. So this is the issue. How can he bridge between his ideology on one side and the situation on the other side.
Finally, I want to ask you about Hezbollah. Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. What is deterring Hezbollah? I know in the past, since the Lebanon war, they've been assembling so many missiles. They've been accumulating all these missiles. They're all pointed at Israel. What stops them from just shooting the missiles? And they're financed by Iran. What's deterring them specifically to do like these sporadic encounters with Israel, just like Hamas is doing? I mean, we don't go to war with Hamas every time they send a missile. So why Hezbollah doesn't test Israel like that every so often?
Well, don't forget that the stockpile of the missiles in Lebanon was made by the Iranians. And this stockpile is waiting for the order from Iran. Iran wants to create a united front around Israel, which will include Hezbollah in Lebanon, will include the militias in Syria and in Iraq, will include the terrorist organizations in Gaza, in Yemen, okay, and maybe other places which they can recruit all kinds of people. And for them, a separate war between Israel and Hezbollah is actually damaging their attempts to unite everybody in order to bring a big attack on Israel, so Israel will fall. Because Israel cannot fight in 7 fronts, especially when hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles are landing on Israel each and every day of the war.
Can we fight in 7 fronts?
I have no idea. But a separate war between Israel and Hezbollah is definitely not in the good interest of the Iranians. And this structure, actually, that Iran is building in the Middle East, it's very sophisticated because it's not based on states. It's based on organizations which have no commitment to the international law because they are not part of the international, because they are not the states. They are mukawama, means resistance. We are not a government. That's why we are not obliged to behave like states. We are not committed by all kinds of conventions in the world, all kinds of documents which bind governments and states. We are not going. What the Houthis in Iran, in Yemen, are a rebellious group. The Hezbollah of Iraq, the Hezbollah of Syria, the Hezbollah of Lebanon are all organizations. So this is why Iran creates this coalition of organizations rather than states, which of course take advantage of the fact that these states are dysfunctional. So they can flourish as a militia because of the lawlessness which is in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and other places, in Yemen as well. So this is actually the Iranian strategy, how to build their power. But it has also to combine between the contractors, means Hezbollah here and there, because Iran doesn't want to be part of this, not by launching all kinds of things, but they need the others to do the dirty job.
And Hamas and Iran are allies, but aren't they enemies? Shouldn't they theoretically be enemies because one is Sunni and the other one is Shia?
Potentially, yes. Factually, they try to ignore these differences. There are more differences. But they try to push them aside because now they are united under the idea of the great jihad against Israel. Once we achieve this goal, we can talk about other things. As long as we have to fight Israel, united we stand, divided we fall. This is the same logic.
Finally, I want to ask you, why do they hate Israel so much? All these Arab states. I mean, they in theory aren't the differences between them more divisive that theoretically they should hate each other even more than what they hate Israel? Why this obsession with Israel?
Well, first of all, they envy us tremendously because wherever they failed, we succeeded. In economy, Israel is a major success compared to their failure. Of course, the Gulf is out because of the oil or business as it is in Dubai. But most of the Arab countries are economically failing for many years already. So they envy us because of our economy. Secondly, we are a vibrant democracy, which while they are still dictatorships, so they envy us, the people. Because here we live in freedom, we can speak, we can say whatever we like, we can publish, we can, do whatever we like with ourselves, and as long as we don't hurt somebody physically, or if we don't incite people to kill somebody. These are things which are not allowed by law, but everything else is allowed for freedom of speech. Okay, they envy us for living in such an environment that enables us to do whatever we like. Fathers cannot force their daughters to get married in Israel, because as of 18, when the girls go to the army, now she can do whatever with herself, whatever she likes.
So do you think actually the people in these states yearn for democracy and for freedom? Is this something that they don't even know that? So it's like, for example, the people in Cuba, they don't know anything else than communism. So, I mean, they hear some people that live in the U.S., so some of them come, but do they actually yearn that? Do you think that...
People who live under dictatorship know everything. They have their ways how to acquire the news, how to understand the news, how to understand what they try to hide in the news, or what manipulations they try, means the government tries to manipulate your mind by. So they know it already. People are not stupid. And they understand very well what their government wants when they say whatever they say. So this is what usually happens in dictatorships. People who live in democracies where papers actually say whatever they like, and lie or not to people whenever they like. They can say whatever they want to publish. The readers do not develop the need to understand what is not said in the media. So this is why, in many cases, when I was speaking to Americans, they were telling me, hey, somebody said something, like the Mufti of Saudi Arabia, of Iran said that it's not allowed to build a nuclear weapon, Islamically, because it's not good. So they said, see, they say that it's not allowed by Islam to produce a nuclear weapon. So why are you so much afraid of it? Okay, they are not aware of the fact that whenever an Iranian moves his lips and his sound could be heard, he is lying. Because this is not the situation in America. In America, when people say something to you, they mean what they say, and they say what they mean.
Because the government is behind their words.
Of course. But in Iran, everybody is lying. And they don't get it in America. That when the Iranians sign an agreement, the last thing on earth will be to implement what is written in the agreement. This agreement will only be the basis for the other negotiations. Will come out another agreement which is better for them, but it will not be implemented because it will be the basis for further negotiations, which will bring in another agreement better for them, which will also be only a launching pad for the next negotiations. This is how they work. That's how they work. And the world has not yet understood that this is the way how the Iranians negotiate.
The U.S., the West is so obsessed with democracy that they want to implement democracy all over the world as if democracy in it by itself is good. Hamas was elected democratically. Hitler came into power democratically. So who cares about democracy as an ends? Don't we care about democracy as a means to an ends, which is good governance? And do you think the Middle East can work with democracy, or can we have better governance with a dictatorship that governs, properly these areas, and not, a terror group that gets democratically elected?
Look, democracy actually, I would describe it as a cake, which comprised of some ingredients, which are human rights, political freedoms, women's rights, gays and lesbians' rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from religion, freedom of transportation, and freedom of profession, work, and elections. These are the 10 ingredients of the democratic cake, okay? In Islamic societies, this cake, as good as it sounds in Western societies, in Islamic societies, most of these ingredients create a very severe allergy. What do you mean, freedom of women? That women are free to do whatever they like, with whoever they like, whenever they like? Since when? It's allowed in Islam. That a woman can, perform an abortion. She is not the owner of the fetus. Her husband is. In all kinds of things of freedom of women, which are either totally, or in most cases could not be accepted in Islamic societies. Freedom of gays and lesbians in Islamic societies, unheard of. Freedom of speech, another problem, because if you maintain freedom of speech, means that you can speak against the religion or criticize the religion. This is something which is totally unacceptable by Islam. Equality, very important value in democratic societies. What do you mean equality? Between Muslims and Christians, or Jews, or infidels, or Hindus? Al-Islam ya'lu wa la yu'al alayhi, means Islam is superior above everything else. Nothing can be above Islam. So how can you accept the idea of equality in Islam? It's totally unacceptable. So this is why the framework of democracy is not only stranger to Islamic societies, it is actually the enemy of their set of values.
Even in more moderate countries like the UAE.
The UAE are not democratic countries at all. They are tribal societies and tribal states. And this is actually something which is very hard for Westerners to understand. Because in the Western mindset, there is either democracy or dictatorship. These are the two options for a government. When you don't have neither democracy nor dictatorship, you have chaos. Okay, these are and if you want a state to be, stable state, it can be only democracy or dictatorship. They don't know the marketplace of political ideas as only two kinds of merchandise. Therefore, democracy and dictatorship, okay? And there are alternative means if you are not a democracy, you are a dictatorship. And in order to get rid of dictatorship, you have to adopt democracy. Okay, this is the mindset in the West in general. However, they do not know that there is another kind of way how to run a state, which is tribalism, which is neither democracy nor dictatorship. It is something else. A tribe which governs itself, by itself, for itself, like the kibbutz, with rules of itself. No elections, because they don't need elections. They have leadership. They have natural leadership, unlike democracies. Okay, so for a society which thinks in tribal terms, this government of tribalism is the most natural. So what is it? Since it doesn't have elections, it is a democracy? Can't be. So what is it? A dictatorship, according to the Americans. No, it is not a dictatorship. This is tribalism in its best manifestation. The Emirates, they don't understand it, the Americans. Ask any American, what are the United Arab Emirates or Qatar? which the democrats in
Dictatorship.
what is this, dictatorship or democracy? It puzzles them because they, on one side, they understand that there is no other option, but they see something which functions neither by democracy nor by dictatorship.
But it functions very well.
Definitely, because it functions according to the culture of the Middle East, not the marketplace of ideas which exist in the West.
And that makes sense also for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Understanding that, then it's better to create a tribal society, even if it's not a democracy.
Americans and Europeans demand us to follow the Western mindset and establish state, Palestinian state, which will end up like Syria, because it's the same thing, or like Iraq, because both in Syria and Iraq, in Yemen as well, the social characteristics of the society were ignored. And this is why these countries are failing states. Yeah. While in the Gulf, they were taken in account. This is why they are successful states.
Makes sense. Well, hopefully we will have peace soon in the Middle East.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Professor Kedar.
My pleasure, my honor.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Professor Kedar, I believe, posts videos many times on his YouTube channel. We'll put up a link in the description of his YouTube channel. Please follow him in Twitter, social media, etc. And thanks everyone for joining again.